Let's talk about a 9-digit number that you've probably never heard of, but it's a number that unlocks billions of dollars for the US economy, and for millions of people, it's the key to their entire financial life. It's called the ITIN, and trust me, it is packed with surprises. So just imagine this for a second. You're required to pay US taxes, but you're not eligible to get a social security number. How do you even do that? How would you open a bank account or get a car loan? It sounds like a total catch-22, right? Well, it turns out there's a very specific tool the government created to solve this exact problem. And that tool is the ITIN. That stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. Probably the best way to think about it is like a special key. It doesn't open every single door, but for one very specific, very crucial lock, the US tax system, it's the only one that fits for a whole group of people. Okay, so let's be super clear about its official job. According to the IRS, the folks who issue it, an ITIN is a tax processing number, period. End of story. Its only official purpose is to let people who can't get a social security number comply with US tax law. And here's a little pro tip for you. You can always spot an ITIN because it begins with the number 9. And this isn't some new thing the government just cooked up. The ITIN program actually goes all the way back to 1996, created to solve a huge tax collection issue. And its impact? It's been massive. By 2019, people filing with ITINs were pouring over $5.8 billion into the US economy. And today, there are nearly 6 million active ITINs out there. That is a huge number of people taking part in the tax system. So what does it actually take to get one of these? Well, it's not quite as simple as just filling out a form online. The process is really precise, and if you get just one tiny detail wrong, it can throw a wrench in the whole thing. So let's open up the user manual. The whole thing really boils down to 3 core steps. First, you've got the application form itself. Second, and listen, this is probably the most important part, you have to submit it with a valid federal tax return. So you can't get an ITIN just in case you might need it someday. You have to have a legitimate, current reason to be filing taxes. And third, you have to prove who you are with official documents. And this right here, this is Form W7. This is the heart of the entire application. If you look at it, it's not just asking for your name and address. It's making you state the exact reason you need an ITIN. And that reason almost always has to be tied directly to a tax filing requirement. This piece of paper is the literal link between your identity and your tax obligation. Now, I want to give you a really critical piece of advice here, something that can save people a world of stress. The rules say you have to submit original documents, like your passport. But I mean, who really wants to put their passport in the mail? No one. This is where a little-known resource called a Certified Acceptance Agent, or a CAA, is an absolute game changer. These are people authorized by the IRS to verify your documents for you, so your passport never even has to leave your site. But listen, getting the ITIN is really just step 1. You also have to keep it active. The rule is super simple. Use it or lose it. If you go 3 consecutive years without filing a tax return, poof, your ITIN expires. And then you're right back at square one, starting the whole application process over again. Okay, so we've established that the ITIN is a tool for taxes. But what if I told you that's really only half the story? Because over the years, this simple tax number has kind of evolved. It started unlocking doors far, far beyond the IRS, creating this powerful, unofficial second life for itself. And that really leads us to the most important question about the ITIN. If the government's official line is that it's only for taxes, is that how it's actually being used out in the real world? Well, as millions of people have discovered, the answer is a big, resounding no. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Financial institutions, banks, lenders, they realized there's this huge market of people who are paying taxes but don't have an SSN. So they started accepting ITINs instead, and all of a sudden, this tax number became the key to opening a bank account, to getting a car loan, to even getting a credit card. And maybe most importantly, it became a pathway to start building a US credit history. But of course, whenever something becomes this powerful, you get a lot of confusion, a lot of myths, and some of them can be pretty dangerous. So let's dive into the fine print and really separate the facts from the fiction here. This comparison chart really lays it all out. Their primary purpose is totally different. One is for taxes, the other is for benefits. But the most critical distinction, the one you absolutely have to remember, is this: an ITIN does not, under any circumstances, authorize you to work in the US. It doesn't make you eligible for Social Security benefits, and it does not grant you any kind of immigration status. It is purely and only a tax processing number. Okay, so this brings us to the elephant in the room. It's the question that keeps a lot of people up at night. If you give all of this personal information to the IRS to get an ITN, is it safe? Could it ever be used against you? Now, on paper, the answer is pretty clear. Yes, your data is safe. There's a really powerful federal law. It's part of the tax code itself that basically acts like a firewall around your IRS data. It explicitly prohibits the IRS from sharing your information with other government agencies, and that includes immigration enforcement. But you might have noticed I said it generally prohibits it. There are a few cracks in that firewall, and the biggest one is a federal court order. If law enforcement is conducting a criminal investigation that has nothing to do with taxes, it is possible they could get a court to force the IRS to hand over that taxpayer data. And this gray area, this is what creates a very real, very legitimate fear for a lot of ITIN holders. And this isn't just a theoretical problem. This quote from a worker named Juan, it really brings the whole dilemma to life. He's trying to weigh the risk of getting in trouble for not filing his taxes against the risk of what could happen if he does. It's this constant, high-stakes calculation that millions of people are forced to make. So, at the end of the day, we're left with this fascinating paradox, a number that was created for one very specific purpose that has now taken on this whole other life, all while carrying some serious risks. It's a system born out of necessity, one that exists in a really delicate and often controversial balance, and the question of how, or even if, this system should evolve, well, that remains one of the most complicated issues in tax and immigration policy today.